Started streaming. What's up, everyone? Happy Saturday. I made sure I had my mic on before I started. A couple things, a couple announcements before we start. I'm heading to London. I'm going to be playing in London for those of you that are there or going to come to the show. I'm playing at the Bloomsbury Theatre on the 30th. I don't know what day of the week it is next week. I think Wednesday, maybe? Thursday? When is it? I'm going to look it up here. Next week, this coming week. This week? Next week? Yeah. The 30th. It's Thursday night. Bloomsbury Theatre. Pretty exciting. I can't wait, actually. I'm going to be there a couple days early. And I might go out and do some walking around London. Probably go visit some guitar stores. I'm going to... supposed to go to Abbey Road Studios one of the days. I'm going to be going to Marshall Amps. And I've got a couple other things planned. So I'll be doing a live stream from London next week. Probably not on Saturday, but maybe on Saturday. We'll see. The timing's weird. It's 5 hours. They're moving ahead this week, I guess, on the 26th. So tomorrow, I think, they move ahead. So it'll be a 5 hour difference. Okay. Go to my website, click purchase the Beato bundle, still on sale for 99 bucks. It's my Beato Book Interactive, my ear training course, which we'll talk about ear training, my Beato Beginner Guitar, my Beato Quick Lessons Guitar, which is really like an intermediate to advanced guitar course. They're all interactive courses. They have videos. They have the Beato Ear Training has programs that ear training, interactive training modules that use 80 different or hundreds of interactive training modules and 80 videos to talk about ear training, which we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about perfect pitch. That's all for 99 bucks. It's a $436 savings. That supports the channel so I can make these trips like I'm making to England. Okay. Some of you that watch my channel from the beginning and saw the videos I had of my son Dylan way back 7 years ago now, when Dylan was 8, that were actually on, they're on this channel. I reposted them, but they were on Facebook and they got millions and millions of views. And I really didn't know that much about perfect pitch when at that point in my life. I knew a couple people that had it. One guy in undergrad, just one guy in undergrad that I knew that had perfect pitch. A couple of the professors at Ithaca had it when I was teaching there. And then in grad school, my friend Iden, he had the best ear of anyone I've ever seen, period. No, unbelievable. So when I discovered Dylan had perfect pitch, I did a lot of research on it. And the reason I did was I was just like, why does Dylan have perfect pitch? And no one in my family had it, and none of my nieces or nephews had it. So it wasn't in my family, so it was probably in my wife's family either. So it must have been some type of a reason that outside of something I did with Dylan that that either made the gene express itself or whatever it is. So I realized Dylan had a perfect pitch when he was just over 3 or so. And I've talked about this on the channel before, that I did listening to what I call high information music with him every day as a kid. And then I discovered it was 1 in 10,000 people have it, and I read a lot of research papers on it. And then I had 2 assistants in a row. For those of you that follow the channel for years, I had Michelle and I had Carol that both had perfect pitch. And it was fascinating. I remember one time I went out to eat with Michelle and Carol and Dylan, and everybody had perfect pitch in the car but me. And then as I've interviewed people, out of the people I've interviewed, Keith Jarrett, perfect pitch. I don't know if Thomas Newman, perfect pitch. Billy, you think of anybody else that has perfect pitch I've interviewed that I know for sure? I didn't ask Sting. So one of the things about perfect pitch is that everyone loses it beginning. Oh, Gary Burton had perfect pitch. The great vibes player, genius, Gary Burton. Gary, one of the interesting things that unfortunately we didn't talk about during my interview with him that he mentioned while we were getting set up is that he lost his perfect pitch after he had a heart. He was getting a procedure done on his heart, and there was had an accident with it or something like that, and he got put on a bypass machine. I believe was the story that Gary was telling me. And then for 22 minutes or so, and he woke up, and a few days later, he didn't realize he had lost his perfect pitch. It wasn't until a couple months later that he played a gig with Chick Corea, and he told me that Chick played this. Jordan Rudess, another person that has perfect pitch that I interviewed. So Chick played a chord, and Gary's like, "Why are you playing that in D flat major?" And he said, "What do you mean?" Or what? He goes, "I'm playing it in G." And Gary said, "No, you're playing it in D flat." Chick says, "I'm playing in G I'm playing in F." And then Gary walked over to the piano, he saw it, and then he just couldn't even play. He couldn't, because he'd had perfect pitch his whole life. He didn't know, everything sounded wrong to him, right? So it really led to him having to retire. That's what he told me. And like I said, unfortunately, this stuff we didn't get recorded because the video camera was up. The guys that I hired to do it just didn't pick this stuff up. So everybody loses it with age, though. It starts to become inaccurate. Of everyone that I've talked to, in their 50s, people usually in their mid-50s. There's a great, I did a video on this, everyone loses perfect pitch, or why everyone loses perfect pitch, something like that, a while ago. And literally everyone that I've talked to that has perfect pitch that is over 60 or so has lost their perfect pitch, or it's become inaccurate. Except for Keith Jarrett. Keith said still has his perfect pitch at 77, almost 78. So is it a party trick? No. It's just people are able to identify these things. But is it really something that's necessary? And obviously the answer is no. Now, why is the answer no? That's the question. Well, the answer is no because any of the things that you need to do to associate with pitch, you can do with relative pitch. Some people think that perfect pitch means the ability to sing in tune. If I think bah, that note is A flat, and if I am now I don't know if that's A flat, but I will check. So that note is A flat, and I sang it in tune. Okay. If I have a reference tone, ba ba, I know that second note is a C, ba is a G, ba F, ba E flat, ba D, ba. When I'm thinking these notes, right? If I go ba ba, I'm thinking A flat C, G F, E flat D, B flat, B flat. No, that'd be B. Sorry. So if I go to my phone, let me see here if I have a piano app on here. I do. That'd be B flat. So A flat C, G F, E flat D. B flat. The way I'm thinking of this, though, I'm thinking A flat C. So I'm thinking down a minor sixth, ba. Then I'm thinking up a fifth, ba, down a whole step, or a major second, da, down a major second, da, down a half step. And if I go ba, I'm thinking up a major sixth there. Okay, so I'm basically relating every note not to A flat. Okay, what you need to do is you need to relate every note to each other, which is called relative pitch. Okay, it's relative to. You could do this with any pitch and do the same interval relationships. But the way that, so there's a lot of things that are done through identification of intervals that make it as useful as perfect pitch, okay? Now, the same thing goes for hearing chords, okay? So if you have perfect pitch and you play a chord, typically people with perfect pitch hear the individual notes of a chord. Okay, so if I played a C major chord, I'd have to go to the piano, but if I have those three notes there, right? If I played them, I can't really. Oh, there it is on my phone. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but whoops. That's a C major chord. I'm actually playing that on my phone app. That's pretty good, isn't it? Whoops. So that's a C major chord. But people with perfect pitch hear C, E, G. They hear those three notes separate from the chord. The benefits of having relative pitch, one of the benefits is being able to hear those notes as an entity, as a major chord, a major triad, okay? It doesn't matter whether it's C major. That could be an E major chord. That could be an F major chord. That could be a flat major chord, right? And anything else relative to it is going to be related to that. But if I have the C major chord, whoops. If I had to hear da, I can't really play it. I'm trying to play that note D in there. I can't. You know, it would actually be helpful if I had my keyboard hooked up, but I don't. But that note D, which is the ninth, I just related it to the C major chord. Okay, so I know what the root, ba, C, ba, D, E, G, and that's a C add 9 chord. When I hear a C add 9 chord, I guess I can grab a guitar, right? So this is how you know it's not a green screen. See, my guitar is sharp now. Hold on, I'm going to tune it. Now, I could tell my guitar was sharp as soon as I played a note on it. And how did I know? How did I know it was sharp? Because as soon as I heard it, I heard the chord, I played a C major chord, and I was like, that's out of tune. I knew it was sharp. Okay, so another thing, in addition to being able to identify chords, a major chord, a minor chord, a major chord, a dominant 7th chord, a dominant 9 chord, a minor 7 flat 5 chord, a diminished 7th chord. These things have a sound to them that if you have perfect pitch, you'll once again hear the individual notes of those chords, and some people can actually hear them as chords. That was one of the things that Dylan was able to do, is that Dylan, I shouldn't say was, is able to do, is he can hear those as chords as well. He recognizes the sound of them. But if you have this vocabulary of recognized sounds, and this is like a big thing that I teach in my ear training course, is to be able to quickly identify what a chord sound is. Now, I'll play two different chords for you, and they're very subtly different. Check this out. Or... you know, when you have your instrument is sharp and you try and bring it down to pitch, it takes a second here. Hold on, because this bugs me to get it. Okay, it should be good now. It's interesting that people, there we go, that somebody on here was like Jordan Rudess. Good call on that. Okay, so check this out. Or those two chords sound very similar, right? Listen. One of them is C add 9. C major add 9. One of them is C sus2. Listen again. One of the chords, the first chord has the note ba in it. The second chord, you hear ba. You don't hear that ba unless I did this. There's add 9 there, okay? Being able to tell the difference between a sus2 chord and an add 9 chord is very helpful, okay? Now, this vocabulary of recognized sounds, this is a thing that you develop that by practice, and that's it, right? You just recognize what these chords sound like. They have a particular sound. If I hear this chord like that, I know, oh, that's a 13 flat 9 chord. I just know the sound of the chord. Many of you will hear this chord. I'll move my guitar. Thanks, Janine. Many of you will hear that chord and you say, oh, that sounds like the Jimi Hendrix chord, right? Because it is. Maybe he'd do, if he's tuned down, half step be there, but that's his dominant 7 sharp 9 chord. It has a very particular sound to it. And people recognize that chord because it has a very, you know, you just recognize what Purple Haze sounds like. You hear that first chord and know that. If you hear this, I don't need to tell you what song that is. You know what the sound of that is, right? It's the same thing with recognizing particular chord voicings, okay? So in addition to, they just have a sound to them. I can't, it's hard to describe, but it's just, that's a minor add 9 chord. Sorry. Minor add 9 chord. If I hear, or maybe that's a minor add 9 chord there. If you hear this chord, you know what that chord is, right? You recognize it. It has a very, very particular sound to it. So developing this vocabulary of these sounds is very important, and then developing the relationship of one note to the next. Okay, now if I play this note A flat that I started on, and I sing da, and then I sang da, 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 da. I'm just thinking, what is the relationship of the note that I'm singing to the note that I just played? Okay, that is relative pitch. It's relative to the other pitches that you've heard around it, or it's relative to a particular tone. Now, if you combine these skills together, though, the ability to recognize a melody and what the interval relationships are, and then also recognize what a chord progression is, because that's another important thing. If you hear, let's say you're in the key of G, right? And then I go to this chord. It's like, what chord is that? Well, that's the 6th minor chord. Dun, dun, bum. So I did 1, 6, 4, 5, 4, 4 minor, back to 1. Okay. So if you can recognize the chord pattern, right? What Roman numeral is it related to whatever the first chord is? If you can recognize the chord quality, major, minor, diminished, augmented, it could be a minor add 9, could be a major add 9, could be just a sus4 chord, it could be an add 4 chord. These are all different types of things. Add 4 would be a major chord. Let's say if it's a major add 4, it would be a major chord, major triad with the added 4th. So let's say I have a D add 4. That would be that chord. So you got a D major, or I could just do it here, I guess. That'd be a D add 4, but over F sharp. Here's your D major. Root, 3rd, 5th, sus4. If I put ba at the bottom of it, right? And woo, that's nice. Beautiful. Right there, I put E and B at the bottom. And you hear that, and you're like, okay, what is that chord? That's E minor. That's the 9th, the 11th, and the flat 7. Beautiful, right? So there's your major add 4. So it's D major add 4 with an F sharp as the lowest note. Then I just added E and B at the bottom. So I made it a beautiful E minor 9 with the 11 with the 7th in there. That implies that the 7th in there. But the reason this thing sounds beautiful is because da 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 is that flat 9 interval. That flat 9 interval there, it makes the chord, to me, really beautiful. I love that sound. So when I hear that, though, a voicing like that, I've played those voicings so much that I recognize those. I immediately hear when there's a flat 9 interval in a chord. It just gives it a particular sound that you can't, that you can only describe by being, by figuring out things that have that in them, right? It's kind of like if you hear a chord progression like this. Once again, those will be subtly different. I could go. Okay, so I did G. Check this out. I'll do a different one. Okay, the middle chord was different. Listen again. Here's the first way. Or and the second chord, if you should hear da da, you hear that note G to A change there. The first time I did okay, so I did G to G over F sharp, G major over F sharp, it'd be like G major 7. But hear this interval. Bum, bum, that flat 9 interval is so recognizable. So the difference between this chord and that chord, it's very, they're very subtle. But when I hear that, I know it instantly. I just know that from experience, from practicing my relative pitch by training my ear all the time. And I've done this forever. People are putting songs in there, Tonight, Dust in the Wind. Yes, those all use that thing. You notice that. Christian says, I hear that as more of a D over F sharp thing. It's not a thing. It's either a D over F sharp or it's something else. This is not a D over F sharp thing. That's a G over F sharp, right? It's really you get the A in there, so it's you have the added note chord there too. It's really the A would be the add 9, but it's down low. That's really a D over F sharp, though. D major over F sharp, down to a E minor 7 or E minor 7 like that, right? So that minor 7 chord, here's a minor chord, minor 7. So you go da, listen for da, or da. That would be a minor 6 chord. Christian, yes, D sus over F sharp. Yeah. Da, 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 that's kind of like in Eleanor Rigby. You hear McCartney sing that. All lonely people were due. People were due. They all belong. All lonely people. Do they all come from? No. I'm thinking of Eleanor Rigby. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Where it uses the major 6th on the E minor and use the flat 6 when it goes up. Can never think of another example of a song that actually does that. Eleanor Rigby is one of the only songs that blends the natural 6 and the major 6. Unless you guys know of another song that does that, I'd like to have you put it in the chat there, because that's an important thing there. It's a unique thing that you find in classical music, but you very rarely find it in pop music. The way that McCartney uses there is an incredibly cool, such a unique melody, great melody, perfect song. Perfectly, Wishing You Were Here. Ooh. But it's not really that. So that's a old Chicago song, Wishing You Were Here. It's actually a very interesting, that was an interesting call on that, because it kind of does it, but it's really D minor 7 to E major over D to E flat major over D. This is more of a Phrygian sound. It's a great song. Great call on that, actually. I haven't thought about that song in a long, long time. But, okay, this is interesting, right? It's like, when I saw that, and I was like, okay, how does Wishing You Were Here go? And I had to think about it for a second. I hear it in my head, right? And I think, okay, it starts on a minor 7 chord. And it didn't have to be D minor 7. It could have been here. Could have been here. I just played it up a whole step, Okay, I did it in E. I just transposed it, right? So I did E minor 7 to, then you look at this triad, like, okay, what is that triad? That's F sharp major over E, then F major over E, right? That Phrygian sound to E minor. So it doesn't matter as long as all the relationships from one chord to the next are relative. That's the only thing that is that somebody just said it's not as haunting that way. That's right. Why is that though? Why is it not as haunting? One of the reasons that that particular song I think works in that key. This is interesting too, because this is part of perfect pitch, I believe, is that people get used to hearing songs in certain keys and they just can't, and it's an element of everyone kind of having perfect pitch. You may not have perfect pitch, but you have the elements of perfect pitch where you recognize what things should sound like to the ear. And I think that's I give you a funny example. So I went to a concert by a really big artist. This is probably about 6 years ago. Older artist. And I don't want to say who it was because I love their music. But the songs were down a minor third, all of them. And the songs didn't sound anything like them. These were massive hit songs that you've heard a million times on the radio. And none of it sounded right. I didn't even know what songs I was hearing because it was so weird hearing every song down a minor third. I'm listening to these things and they would be the most popular songs. These things were number one hits that they'd be playing back to back. And you'd listen to the verse of a song or the intro and you'd be like, what is this song? I don't even recognize this. And because you're so used to hearing it in a particular key. Some songs, it's interesting. One of the songs recently that I was talking about in an interview was Disarm, Billy Corgan. And I think it was Disarm. I think Disarm is actually in E minor. Now, Billy tunes down to E flat most of the time. A lot of Smashing Pumpkins records, he tunes down to E flat. And I would, and it was weird to hear that because you're so used to hearing Smashing Pumpkins songs like that. So, anyways, it's just things like that I immediately recognize that as being in that when I started hearing music like that was down a half step, the bands that started tuning down to E flat, it had a freshness to it that you had never heard before, or that it made common things that were repetitive in rock music sound fresh again. Anyways, is perfect pitch overrated? Yes, it's overrated. You do not need it. You just need to have a really well-developed relative pitch and pitch memory or vocabulary of recognized sounds. You can get it by getting my ear training program. Go to rickbeato.com, click on the sale, $99 for everything for my bundle. That's my Beato Book Interactive, which is a video course and with audio examples on almost everything in the book. My ear training course, my beginner guitar course, and my quick lessons pro. You guys are the best. Have a great rest of your weekend. See ya.